This episode is brought to you by freedadcourse.com. You are always one conversation away from changing your life, and the power of hello is something that I subscribe to every single day, and I'm always saying hello to new people everywhere I go. Increasing your opportunity, increasing your connection, and getting access to the solutions to the problems that you are facing, whether you're on active duty or just beginning your veteran transition or even transitioning out for 20 years. On the other side of hello are the solutions that you're looking for. Again, head on over to freedadcourse.com. Get your 5-episode audio course to create more connection, create more friendships, and get back to living the life that you're trying to design.
Dory 1, this is Fireteam Delta. Dad's coming home. Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Killoy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 47 of the Military Veteran Dad. Today, it's Veterans Day. And on Veterans Day, we are going to talk about a topic that we've talked about a lot on the podcast. Well, we kind of just stay surface level. Well, today we're going to go into the weeds, and we're going to go into the weeds with it, nobody else other than myself. And the topic we're going to discuss today is legacy. We talk about it a lot, and then we talk about it some more. But I honestly believe this is the one of the biggest takeaways that I've realized doing this podcast and doing 47 episodes of it, that legacy is one of the biggest things that we leave on the table as military dads. So as I was doing some research for this episode, I wanted to go into outside of my thoughts and bring in some other perspectives. A lot of people start when they start a speech with the dictionary. So I decided to not be creative and start with the dictionary. And honestly, I was a little bit disappointed with the definition that it gave. So the definition of legacy, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the first one it says is a gift by willing, especially of money or other personal property. Second one, something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor, or from the past, the legacy of ancient philosophers. The war left a legacy of pain and suffering. Number 3, a candidate for membership in an organization, such as a school or fraternity order, who is given special status because of a familiar relationship to a member. Also pretty bad. All of those really didn't resonate with me, and they really didn't strike a chord at all. Like I said, I was really disappointed with the dictionary today. But honestly, that doesn't negate what I still believe to be true about legacy. If anything, maybe the definition that we're talking about isn't yet written or isn't defined yet in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So for me, legacy is something that I didn't search out for when I saw this podcast or when I started it. It wasn't something that was on my mind a lot. And it was only really on my mind as I started to do this podcast. And what's transformed from this is this idea that as military dads, we lived an extremely rich life. That life was filled with adventure. It was filled with adversity. It was filled with obstacles. It was filled with tragedy in many cases. It was filled with scars that in some cases are physical. Maybe we no longer have a limb. Maybe we have a scar from a bullet wound. All of these things are things that happened to us. But I'm a big believer that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. You just might not always know why. And I'm not saying you get shot so that way it happens for you. But what I'm saying, everything that comes into your life can generally have a purpose later. And that's what I believe as military dads, we were gifted from our experiences. So when I think of legacy, I think of the ability to have this massive 1,000-piece Snap-on toolbox. It is top of the line. It's got every wrench that you can think of. Wrenches you don't even know what they're for. And those wrenches are what we get to go out into life and try to figure out what they're used for. And as our kids have a lot of problems. If you're a dad, you know this, especially if they're starting to enter school. My daughter's in 2nd grade, and it's like she's 16, and it's a daily soap opera of different conflicts going on. I have tools in my toolbox from the military that help her get through what she's going through. Whether if it's on the weekend and I'm trying to find something to do, I use my sense of adventure and openness to the world to try to expose my kids to things that they might not have done otherwise. I haven't been able to do it yet, but I believe in the future, I'm going to go on an international trip with my kids because I believe that's an important part of raising a child, to give them a full perspective of how life works. Even something I'm looking forward to is taking my daughter to Washington, D.C. She loves history, and I think that one-on-one trip with me and her would really allow us to connect, and also to her to see the world in a way that a lot of kids growing up don't. But this is what we have as military dads. We have this perspective on the world that very few people have. We are part of the less than 1% of people in the United States that serve their country. That means that we have a perspective that the other 99% don't. So as a military dad, I take it as my marching orders to try to take what I've learned from the military, take what I've learned from life, and instill those things about truth, integrity, honor, commitments. If from the Marine Corps, all of those things I take to my kids to try to make them better adults. Our objective isn't to try to raise good kids. Our objective is always to try to raise good adults. And who has a bigger toolbox is often the person that's going to create the best adult. And like I said in the beginning, military dads have this massive 1,000-piece Snap-on toolbox. So some simple ways that we can create legacy. There's a couple different things that I wanted to dive in. One is making sure you live your legacy. Think about how many times you go on autopilot. I was on autopilot for over 10 years before I even started to become any self-aware of any of the things that were going on in my life. We have to live our legacy. If we want to teach our kids about our life and have them learn what we did, well, we need to be continually setting an example for them to follow. If we want our legacy to be kindness, if we want our kids to go out in the world and create a kindness wave that is so strong, the world can't help but ride the wave with it, we have to lead by that kindness as well. And it goes into the next one is live like you mean it. When we live like we mean it, what we're saying is we're living a life of integrity. And the simplest way that I've broken down integrity is when our words align with our actions. Because oftentimes when I feel the worst, it's on those days that what I said I was going to do, I did not do that. And there's a crazy thing that's happening as I watch my kids grow up. They are watching every step I take. Everything I do, everything I don't do, they are constantly doing it or watching it. How many times, I'm sure it's happened because it's happened to me, where your kids will turn around something to you and you're like, well, you didn't do that. How many times does that happen? Well, that's because we weren't living like we mean it, to make our choices, to make our legacy, to have it defined, to know where we're going. Another good way to kind of wrap this in is loving your spouse and our children with commitment and enthusiasm is a legacy like no other. Think about that. Loving our spouse and our children with commitment and enthusiasm is a legacy like no other. That's truly what legacy is when you create something that is so powerful with your family that the energy created from that can't help but disrupt the energies around it. Another one that I've always liked is, so legacy also has to do with your past, where you've come from. However you've come up, maybe you've come up in a broken home, maybe you were one of the misfits that joined the military where you didn't have a place, so you found a place in the military. Whatever those stories are, maybe you're on the other side of that pain that you've walked through. Those are stories that maybe are hard to tell, but when we share our life with our kids, what we walked through, what made us happy, what made us sad, those stories help shape our kids' view of us, what we created. And there's something that I often like to say, that a veteran is only forgotten when people stop repeating their name. So if we're always telling our kids stories about maybe our adventures, or maybe it's about just one of the amazing things that we got to do, or places we got to go, and maybe it's slightly made up and exaggerated, but to a kid, that story will be so powerful because they'll love repeating it. And as long as they repeat it and remember it, you'll never be forgotten. So always continue to share those stories of your life with your kids Because there's a lot of what I find that when you share a story with your kids from your life, especially if it relates to a problem they're facing. So if maybe it's bullying, maybe it's friendship on the playground. When you share a struggle that you had, that's not a moment of weakness as a dad. That's a moment of strength because you're showing vulnerability and being humble. And think about the legacy that will leave on your son or daughter when they think about sharing something vulnerable. What will the person that hears whatever it is that they're about ready to say feel? Because you went first, Dave, 10 years prior. These are the things that create a strong legacy. Think about where you want to go. For me, I've been on a long road to get to where I am with this Military Veteran Dad podcast. But it all began because I started following my curiosity. So make sure you're grounded in some basic idea or path that you're trying to follow. And another one that we want to talk about, and this is probably the best momentum that you can do for legacy, is create the gift of time. Time is one of those things that's so precious, and we do a lot of things unconsciously that trade time for money, trade time for material objects. But at the end of the day, time invested in your kids and your family is the number one thing that will help move it forward faster. When we started the podcast, there was something I talked about a lot. I don't talk about it as much anymore, but it was this idea that kids spell love T-I-M-E. And again, I'll say that again. Kids spell love T-I-M-E. And if you're hearing that for the first time, maybe you're a new listener. What that essentially means is how will your kids feel? How will they determine if they truly love you? If you were to ask them right now, do you love daddy? Or do you think daddy loves you? Their relationship when they're answering that question is the connection to the time that you've spent with them. That's it. Not the things that you bought, not the money you've given them, not the time on their PlayStation. It comes down to how much personal time have you invested in their life. Something else that's really helped create this idea of legacy, especially for me, as I serve the military dads out there, is living your life in service of others. That a lot of times when we get lost as veterans is when we forget what it felt like working for a team, when we forget what it was like to be part of a community, when we forget what it was like to be part of a tribe. These are all things that make us feel very lonely. I was there. I know about it. It's essentially why this podcast was here, because 5 years ago, that was me. I was the opposite of all the things to do to create a legacy. I was not in service of others. I was only in service of myself. And at that point, I was really only in service of myself for almost feeling sorry for myself. But in the end, as I've moved forward with this podcast, the more people I serve, the better I feel. The more people I serve, the greater impact I have. The more people that I serve, my kids see that example. And then they will go out into the world and serve others as well. And never stop talking about your vision. Whatever your vision, your legacy you want to be, talk about it often. Create a vision board. If you've never heard what that is, essentially creating a bulletin board with a bunch of pictures of what you want your legacy to be. Write your obituary. That's another popular exercise that really helps understand where you want to be in the end. What do you want people to say at the end of your life in that obituary? What moment do you think they're going to remember? What moment do you want them to remember? And then are you living your life in alignment with that obituary? That's another going to be a hard one if you were to write your obituary. Because a lot of times you could probably write it fairly easy, but then if you were to do the inner work, it said, am I really on that path of where I want to be in the end? I know for me that if you've heard a couple times maybe on the podcast that I've said, when I turned 30, one of my midlife crises happened, which was triggered from Jay Leno leaving The Tonight Show. And when he left The Tonight Show, I felt extremely lonely. And here's why. When he left The Tonight Show, it was his final episode, and it was farewell. And all these people came out of the woodwork. It might as well have been a living eulogy. And all these people had great things to say about Jay and how he helped them get where they are. Maybe it was that chance as a comic. Maybe it was that, like Jerry Seinfeld, that very first time on The Tonight Show. All of these things helped catapult these people to where they were today. And Jay selflessly served and helped them get there. And for me, I was like, there's going to be nobody at the end to say any nice things. I'm not doing anything in service of others. And it just really ate me up. And I'm like, I don't know how to fight that feeling. And so fast forward today, being able to talk about where I was and where I am today, it's light years different from where I was. I am now on a path that I believe where I'm going to be in the end, and the path that I'm on will get me to that end. These are the things that build the legacy to me. That when we talk about a legacy, we're talking about something that is so strong that the universe can't help but ignore it. And as military dads, we are built and created and armed with enough information to create a legacy so strong that it rivals the one of Steve Jobs. I honestly believe that if veteran military dads use the gifts that we have to create kids that go out into the world to change it, the kids that we create can't help but create and close some of the gaps that we see in our society. Think of the perspective that a military child has growing up segregated across the United States, moving from school to school, being connected with different people from all over the world. These are perspectives that shape their view of the world forever. And if you could be a dad that showed up in their life to get them to where they need to be in the end, to make that impact for who they need to be, imagine what that will do. There's one other topic that is worth summing up on this as we wrap up here. And the legacy, and this is really comes back to this idea that a lot of military dads try to answer the question, why did I live and my friend died? It's one that haunts us. It doesn't haunt me, but I know that it's out there haunting other military dads. And the one thing that you need to think about is if that friend that didn't come home, because you came home and he did. Maybe he sacrificed. Maybe you were in the right spot and he was in the wrong spot. If he was a dad, think about his kids. And I'm sure that you've already thought about his kids. But think about that he never gets to feel their love again. And his kids never get to feel their father's love again. They will go through the rest of their life never feeling that warm touch to a father's love. And you do. Now think about the gift that he gave you, that he no longer gets to do that, and his kids are going to live with that burden for the rest of their life. But your kids do. So when I think about legacy and being a military dad, to me, all the brothers and sisters didn't come home. It's up to us to create a legacy that is worthy of their sacrifice, that they gave every dad and every mom that came home from war the gift of creating something so strong that defining moment for us, we need to live our life in a way that is worthy of the sacrifice of our brothers and sisters not coming home. That whatever we do in our life should be measured against the gift that they gave us. And to make sure that we show up as the best dad, because there is a kid out there that never gets to call dad again. And you do. So take this as a reminder that as our brothers and sisters gave their life in the war, and whether you believe the war or anything about it, doesn't matter. They did it. It's happened. That we need to define our life and measure it against that sacrifice that they gave us, that purpose that we all get to come back to, which is our family. We get to hear the words dad from our kids. And think about those words coming into your heart daily, and think about who doesn't get to feel them anymore. And just refine and remember that being a dad is one of the biggest gifts that we get in this world. And we only get it once. We only get it once in our life. And it's going to come and go before you even realize it. And every adult that looks back always says, pay attention. It goes so by so fast. But how many times do we really never sit in that advice? Well, I'm here to remind you, it goes by fast. It's one of the reasons why I have this podcast, because I want to be a dad more than anything right now, because I realize these are the years everybody wants back. Being my kids 7, 5, and 3, this is the golden age of parenting. It's crazy. It's chaos. But these are the years that I'm going to want back when I'm 55, looking back. I will reflect back and measure the choices that I make right now, these years. Were they the right ones, and did I invest that time right? And if your kids are in that young age like mine, know that these are the years where we can shape the biggest impact in our life, on the kid's life. That I've read a statistic that by the age of 6 or 7, like 60% of a child's personality is already determined. So think about that impact from 0 to 6, where if you don't get it right, there's going to be a lot of baggage hanging on as the kids grow up that you're going to be like, man, I wish I would have paid attention there when they were younger. So just show up. Like, again, kids spell love Time. If you're listening to this and this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, the most simplistic step to becoming a better dad, the very first step, is just remember the kids spell love Time. My 3-year-old absolutely loves when I just roll the ball around on the floor. She's like a kid in a candy store. My son loves when I spend 10 minutes playing trains. My 7-year-old loves when I play Phase 10, which is a cards game. Those are 3 things that absolutely blow their world away, and they take very little for me to give them. So as a dad, on Veterans Day, remember that legacy is the one thing that we have as a military dad to leave after we're gone, and our kids are the best chance to carry on that legacy. And as a military dad, there has never been a person on this earth more capable and armed to create the best freaking adults that this world has ever seen. And so with that, I want to sign off on this note that you are a dad. You get to hear the words dad. Know that that's a gift, and it comes from people that don't always get to say it anymore, and that we need to live a life worthy of that sacrifice. And I say it a lot on the podcast, but dads, it's time to come home and let this Veterans Day be a reminder and a pivot where you decided to take that step and come home.
That's a wrap. And thank you for listening to today's show, and I really hope you enjoyed it. The lifeblood of any new podcast are the reviews. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes, I would really appreciate it, and you will help us get the message out to even more military veteran dads. As John Maxwell says, if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Dads, it's time to come home.